Perfect. That's official. We're good to go?
Yep.
Okay. Um, let's just start off with the debate and early voting starting tomorrow. You've had quite the run up until this point. How are you feeling?
I feel really good about it, and I feel really good about our ground game knocking on, oh gosh, I think more than 200,000 doors since August 1st. That's just my team alone. I know we've got a bunch of other groups out here working to get out the vote. This is going to be a get out the vote race. It's very close. My internal polling has showed me consistently above Ruben Gallego. And one of the more recent public polls that I've seen has showed us tied or within the margin of error. So it's going to be a tight race. It's going to be who gets out the vote. And I believe that Republicans, independents, and Democrats are fed up with the direction this Democrat Party has pushed our country, and they are voting for us. I just, as a matter of fact, left an event with Ambassador Rick Grinnell, who was here this morning, and met a Democrat there who said, I'm voting for you. I can't even imagine voting for one more day of this misery that, frankly, Kamala Harris and my opponent, Ruben Gallego, have voted for and ushered in and watched as Americans are suffering.
We'll go back to the polling discussion in a moment, but I want to also talk about abortion because when voters are casting their ballots for who should be in the Senate, who should be in the White House, they're also going to vote on an abortion ballot here. You spoke about it before. How should women go into that ballot box looking at that question, the ballot initiative? What decision do you encourage them to make?
Well, I'm going to first state that as a U.S. Senator, I will not vote for an abortion ban, a federal abortion ban. And I believe it should be left up to the states, just as Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, it should be up to the states to decide this. And so we're going to let the people of Arizona decide. They're going to have to look into their heart and ask themselves what they want to do. We currently do have a 15-week abortion policy here in Arizona that both the Democrats and Republicans have voted for. And there's an initiative on the ballot. And I trust the women and men of this state to make that decision. Ruben wants to take that decision away from us.
You previously called the ballot initiative too extreme. Do you believe that the current 15-week abortion ban is extreme?
I think the 15-week abortion ban, not abortion ban, the 15-week abortion law that we have is actually a good law. And both Democrats and Republicans voted for it. We had Hobbs vote it into law, and we previously had Governor Doug Ducey vote it into law. So I'm going to be voting. I believe that is the best policy. But women are going to decide, men are going to decide in this state. And as their U.S. Senator, that will be the law, period. And we'll work with that. What I do want to do is make sure that we have a strong economy. I want to make sure that we have policies that actually help women and families so that it is easier if a woman does make the decision to have a baby, that she can do it. That's what I want to see.
I want to ask you about Melania Trump's comments on this because I just thought it was fascinating when you see a Republican woman, the wife of the current nominee for Republican nominee for president, come out and defending abortion, saying that it is, quote, imperative that a woman have the choice and that the government should not be involved. You're a Republican woman. What is your reaction to her message
I
there?
think her message is where she is on it. Everyone's going to have a different opinion on this, a different feeling for this, and that's why it's really important that the states decide, that the people of the states decide, and we're going to get that choice.
Moving on in general, this has been, the rhetoric has been heated on both ends. We saw the assassination attempts of the former president. You have called Democrats Marxist. You've referred to them in terms before saying that, the Democratic Party is not representative of the people in this country, that they are taking policies to an extreme end that could hurt people in this country. So my question to you is, what do you make of Democrats as a whole?
Well, I love the Democrat people of Arizona. I think many of them are fed up with the current Democrat Party and the policies that they're pushing. There truly are Marxist policies that are being pushed right now. They talk about a threat to democracy, and they have a woman at the top of the ticket who didn't receive not a single vote. That's a problem. Not one vote did Kamala Harris receive. That to me seems like a threat to democracy. They didn't allow other Democrats to come in. They didn't allow other Democrats to vie for that position when Joe Biden bowed out. They really forced Joe Biden out. I think that's a threat to democracy. This Democrat Party is not the party of yesteryear, the Kennedy Democrat Party. As a matter of fact, the Kennedy Democrats are voting with us. And so I think that's pretty remarkable that the America First Party has become a party of Democrats, independents, and Republicans coming together saying we want to protect the United States Constitution, our Bill of Rights, and what makes us a country. We want to protect our borders, make sure we have safe streets, national security, a strong foreign policy that's not inching us and sprinting us into World War III.
You've called Republican endorsements for your opponent, Gallego. You've questioned them. Even yesterday, I watched your press conference. You've said, well, those are people who maybe voted for Republicans a long time ago, but voted for President Biden in the last election. You've kind of downplayed that. But the Arizona Police Association endorsed Trump at the top of the ticket, and then they endorsed your opponent. Can you explain that?
That's okay. I totally get it. I mean, they needed help immediately to prevent the DOJ hostile takeover, really, of our Phoenix Police Department. And it was everyone who saw that realized it was a quid pro quo, like they needed help. And Ruben Gallego finally jumped in. He's done nothing for police. He finally jumped in and wrote a letter to try to tell the DOJ to back off.
So that's why you think that they
Well, I
endorsed.
think that, and I also think that, frankly, um, they are really worried about the DOJ taking over. It's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to make it harder to do law enforcement. But I have the endorsement of numerous police agencies. The Fraternal Order of Police has endorsed me. I have the AZ Cops, the Arizona Conference of Sheriffs and Police. I have I'm trying to remember all of them. I have so many of the great police endorsements that it's okay that I don't have one of them. We did a poll. 85% of the police, the rank and file, said that they support me. What I want to remind our law enforcement is that Ruben Gallego was a co-sponsor of the George Floyd legislation, which would have defunded the police nationwide. He called police systemically racist. He also called police the bad guys. And so police are horrified. The rank and file are horrified that there would be any support for him. He thinks police are the bad guys.
You talk about polling. You mentioned it several times in this interview already. You've said, including yesterday, that all of the public polling that is out there that is showing, let's say, Trump and Harris neck and neck, or Trump slightly outperforming Harris, and you down like over 10 points, including a recent one from yesterday, you said that that's not accurate.
Yeah.
So should voters trust the polling, or should
No,
they not?
I don't think they should at all. The polling is much like what we saw in 2016, polling that's meant to move the voter into doing something. I know what our internal polling looks like. It's great. I talk to door knockers who are knocking for independent groups, who are knocking for Republican groups. The response people are getting at the door is overwhelming. They're not seeing any crossover vote. And frankly, the AP and the media has done a horrible job of covering Ruben Gallego, and they're lying about this somehow crossover vote. They're lying about that. The AP writes an article saying there's a southern farmer, a southern Arizona farmer and rancher who's voting for Trump and then Gallego. Turns out that person doesn't exist. The name they use is actually a felon in Missouri. This is the kind of horrible reporting that is being done right now. It's yellow journalism.
And I heard you talk about it yesterday, and we interviewed Gallego on Sunday, and I can only have control over what the work that I do. So I know we don't have a lot of time, so I just want to stick to this really quickly because you mentioned your internal polling. So yeah. Should voters trust your internal polling and not public polling? I mean, what is the message
I think
sending?
Internal polling is actually the good stuff. It's the stuff where you don't want any bias at all. You want the real scoop, and that's what I trust. But I trust more the people that I'm talking to. I talk to more Arizonans than anybody in the whole country. I know the people of the state. I've known them for 30 years, and I talk to them every day. And I'm talking to hundreds of people a day, sometimes more than 1,000 people a day. And I know what they're thinking and what is going on in this state.
You've questioned public polling, various institutions
you know
in DC.
What's your name again?
Julie.
Julie, can we please talk about the issues that people care about?
Yes, and I want to move on to that, but just
no,
really
I'm going to
quickly
tell you. I'm going to tell you something. What we're going to do here in Arizona and in Washington D.C. is help turn this economy around for people.
That's great.
We're gonna help secure the border. Ruben Gallego has voted for an open border. Every single vote he's cast on the border has torn this border wide open. So we're gonna make sure that we secure the border, build the border wall, make sure that we stop people from pouring across our border, including criminals, including terrorists, and we're gonna turn the economy around. People are struggling. I have talked to people who are going to food banks, people who used to volunteer at food banks, now are having to go there.
And we'll talk about
No,
that.
no, no, we're going to talk about that now. People don't care about
But let's
what
talk about
you're
the
talking
border.
about.
But you just brought up polling several times. That's why I jumped to that
Well,
question.
people don't care about what we've been talking about in this interview. They
So then
care
why
about
did you bring up polling so many
people.
times?
You brought it up. You've asked 3 questions.
Because I'm following up on what you have said. So in terms of, but people want to know who they can trust. We have a big divide in this country.
Well, I
So let's
know
talk
I can
about-
tell you that people can trust me, and we can't trust Ruben
But how
Gaggo.
can they trust you if you consistently say, don't trust that polling because it shows you losing, don't trust this institution because it's not a favorable outcome to you and the former president? How can they look at you and trust your statements as credible if it seems like you're just cherry picking the institutions, the polls that are showing you in the lead?
I am working with the people of Arizona. The people of Arizona are concerned about the policy that Ruben Gallego has voted for, that Kamala Harris has put in, that is destroying their lives, their livelihood. They cannot afford to feed their families. People have lost jobs here. People are worried about their wages staying stagnant because millions of people, upwards of 20 million people, have come in and taken jobs and pushed the wages down because they're willing to work for almost nothing. And people trust me when it comes to how I will handle immigration, how I will handle the border, how I will handle the economy. I know the people of Arizona, and I know what they're thinking because I'm out there talking to them, asking them how they're getting by and what we can do to make life better.
The biggest voting group in Arizona are independents. You're going to have to work across the aisle to get any of that done, especially because you've said you want to preserve the filibuster. So when it comes to the border, when it comes to the economy, all these policies, are you going to be able to work with your partner, Mark Kelly, in the Senate?
Absolutely.
With the governor of this state, who's a Democrat? Let's say Democrats win the White House. What is your message to voters in Arizona who aren't sure if you can work across the aisle?
Well, I grew up in a large family, so I've had to work with a lot of different people and 9 children. You have to negotiate, you have to work together. At the end of the day, no one gets their way, you got to work together. And what's really going on is Ruben Gallego doesn't want to work together. That's why he wants to get rid of the filibuster. He doesn't want to have any consensus on anything. He wants to get rid of the filibuster, shove through an even more radical agenda. That's not how I will operate. I will operate by working with people. I want to remind you, I worked in a newsroom for 30 years. 95, maybe 98% of people in newsrooms are liberal. I had to work with people who ideologically I didn't agree with, but we worked together and we put out a product every day. So I can work with them. I'm the only one who's been registered as an independent before. I was for a short time registered as a Democrat. I understand people and I understand the people of this state. And Ruben doesn't.
You mentioned the border and immigration. It is so important in this state, as you well know. I've covered immigration in Congress, including the border deal. You mentioned that you would have voted against it.
Yeah.
You don't like that bill. So, but what are you going to do to actually solve this problem and take it from a talking point to actually something that gets
Well, we're going to
passed?
start with a true piece of border security legislation. We're going to build the southern border wall. We're going to expedite the construction of that and fully fund it. We've spent $260 billion funding a war in Ukraine, protecting their border. And we've spent nothing, almost nothing, protecting our border. We've poured money into NGOs who are moving people back and forth, who are importing people illegally into our country. That's where Ruben wants to do, pour money into all of these groups. I want to actually secure the border. I want to get back to no more catch and release, remain in Mexico, the policies we had under President Trump, where we had record low when it came to people coming in illegally. And I fully support legal immigration. My own mother-in-law is a legal immigrant. She's Latina and she came here legally. And I will tell you, talk to first and second generation immigrants, first and second generation Americans who came here legally. They are most furious about what's happening at the border.
You mentioned compromise. You're going to need compromise to get more money for the border wall. Something Democrats brought up this year is they want to see a pathway for dreamers. Would you do that if it meant more money for the border
They had an
wall?
opportunity to do that.
And they did, and the former president told them not to vote for it.
The former president said, I want to make a deal with the Dreamers. I just want money for the wall. They didn't want to. Ruben Gallego voted against that.
But they, in the bipartisan border bill, I mean, this is something that I've
No.
covered extensively.
I'm talking about when President Trump was
But
president.
this was a few months ago when President Trump was not in the White House anymore. This bipartisan border bill had money for the border bill, for more agents, which is something that you've brought up yourself. They didn't even have the pathways for dreamers in there, which was a big sticking point for Democrats for a long time. So what made that bill so bad?
That bill was $115 billion that was going to be sent overseas to kill people, disguised as a border bill.
Where does that come from?
There was
what in that bill?
$115 billion to be sent to Ukraine and other areas where there was war.
Not in the border bill itself.
Are we talking about the same one, the Kirsten Sinema one?
Yes, that
Yes.
border bill had nothing to do by itself as a product, had nothing to do with the money for Ukraine. That is
Well,
an issue
what they did
Republicans
when it
want to
didn't
tie up.
pass is they went back and they signed on for $60 billion more, and Ruben Gallego waved the Ukrainian flag on the floor of
But
Congress.
just to
That's all they care
just to
about.
clarify here, that bill didn't pass because former President Trump and Republicans in the House, but he told them not to put it on the floor for a vote.
That's not why I was opposed to it. I looked at it and said, this is going to codify bad policy and make it harder for us to truly secure the border.
All right, moving on. You talked about, I mean, you've been
We have
asked a
time for
million
one
times.
more question.
You've been asked a million times about whether you lost your election in 2022, whether the former president lost in 2020. I'll give you a moment in case you want to say now that that is not what happened, that they did lose the election, but I know you haven't answered that before. So I'll give you a moment if you wanted to say something differently here before I move on to my question.
I don't ask your question.
As a senator, on January 5th, 2026, so January 6th, 2025, would you vote to codify the election no matter what happens?
Can you imagine asking a soccer player or a football player, will you agree,
But this
right?
is our democratic process and
Are you
our
gonna-
elections that have been
Julie,
secured.
would you like me to answer the question?
I would, but you just posed
Or
it
do
on
you want to argue with me?
No, I'm not looking to argue with you. I just want a clear answer for Arizonans once and for all, because integrity is a big issue here.
If you were playing a soccer game and they said to the soccer team, before this election, will you agree with every single call the ref makes and agree with everything that happens in this game? Nobody would say yes. We want to have a lawfully run election. And
this isn't a soccer game.
If we have a lawfully run election, absolutely, absolutely. There's nothing more I'd rather do if we have a lawfully run election. So let's see. We hope we do. We really do. We want to make sure everything is run perfectly and wonderfully.
Since a judge threw out your lawsuit challenging your own
That
election.
was my last question. I have another event.
But just to be clear, just to put a point in this,
Julie,
because integrity is a question here among your voters in Arizona.
Of course it
and
is.
is why some of them are deciding to support your opponent, even though they're voting for Trump at the top of the ticket. So can you tell them once and for all that the democratic process needs to be respected, that they didn't find anything wrong in your 2022 election against Katie Hobbs?
Julie, I'm gonna end this right now, but I'm gonna say we all in Arizona want honest elections. And I think that Ruben Gallego wants honest elections as well. And so we're working to make sure we have honest elections. That's what I'm willing to say. And I'm willing to say that when Arizona votes for President Trump and me for US Senate, we are going to turn this economy around. We're gonna make our border a safer border. We're gonna make sure that Arizonans are protected from the crime that is exploding on our streets, and we're going to make sure that our kids are protected, our children are protected and getting a solid education. So thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
And we had one on foreign policy, because I know you talked about yesterday.
Unfortunately, you used your time asking all these questions.
No. I just wanted to clarify and give you an
So nice to meet you, hon.
You too.